how do we make Lethbridge a better business environment, or do you have any recommendations for businesses to find new paths or new strategies, or just from what you've seen and lived and breathed?
Yeah. I think what immediately goes to mind when I think about the businesses that are in the Build membership and the ones that are succeeding and doing well are the ones who are investing back into their employees.
Okay.
And I know it's a difficult time. Business is an incredibly difficult thing.
Yeah.
And I know the important thing that you want from a government is one that's predictable and you know the rules and it doesn't change.
Yep.
And in my experience, that's super important.
Yes.
You've got to keep the rules the same. People have to know what the rules are, and they'll work within those.
Yep.
But if they're constantly changing, it's an issue. And
the goalpost moves.
yeah, and that's just not good for business environment. But the ones that I'm seeing do really well understand their employees are their biggest assets.
Okay.
And they're investing in that. And that doesn't mean that you're spending a ton of money. It could just mean after work you're having a sit-down 501 club on Wednesday nights so that people can just sit and chat and be a part of something.
I just want to kind of share your story. We've had a bit of a background, and I've always admired you.
Oh, thank you.
I've always held you in, like I say, very high regard as a professional in whatever you're doing, and so yeah, it's always been like such a pleasure to just know you and your mom, who I got the pleasure to kind of live beside. So,
oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Oh,
I know.
Geez.
So yeah, more or less,
there's all sorts of connections all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more or less like the story of your journey and like where it started, all your business acumen and even community acumen, if you want to touch on that.
Yeah. Well, it is quite a journey. And it's interesting how the journey changes and means different things as you get older.
Yeah.
So, growing up here, probably like many young people, you're like, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. There's more to life. And there is more to life. There's definitely a big wild world out there that we should all experience and learn from. But coming back in 2005 as an adult and coming back to stay.
Yeah.
And I had spent most of my life moving around all the time. We lived on a boat as a kid.
Oh.
We lived in the Caribbean. We lived in the Mediterranean. We moved around a lot. And then with my husband and his career, we moved around a lot. So I've never really had a solid footprint for a big period of my younger adulthood.
Yeah.
But coming back in 2005, it was just clear to me that this is one of the most fabulous cities in the world. And it's worth investing in, and you get out of it what you give into it. And that was one of the reasons that I ran in 2010 for council.
Right.
Is because I was at a point in my life that I knew a lot of stuff or felt I had a lot to give. And I believe if you have something to give, you should give.
I like that.
So I was seeing decisions weren't being made for the future of Lethbridge, at least in my opinion. Yeah. I felt that the decisions were about today, and no one was willing to invest in money into the future. So there was no rec center, for example. Yeah. They were looking at arenas, but they weren't building any. Even things like performing arts were still, these conversations kept happening, but nothing was being done.
No traction, really? Is that like
well,
it wasn't moving forward?
A lot of the conversation went back to that's going to increase tax rate or that's going to cost something. Right. Well, of course it's going to cost something, but it's going to give you more back.
Right.
So your return on investment, if you're just looking at the cost of something, it will never be the right time to build.
Right.
So, but those were the discussions that were happening.
Okay.
And I just wasn't seeing any forward movement for our community. So that's why I ran. And I ran on 5 pillars, and I stayed true to those.
Yeah.
One of the things that I promised to do, and I wish I could go back.
Okay.
Because I promised to write a blog on what happened in council and why I voted the way I did. Now, I stayed true to, in council, I always explained especially if I voted against something, why.
Oh.
And so I broke down. Or when we went through budget deliberations, here's why I've arrived at the decisions I've arrived. So I've always been very clear and very open. I want people to know what I considered.
Well, now there's video, you could do that.
So what I didn't do is keep up with the blog. And I think it's Well, I know it's because I wasn't getting the feedback that people were reading it, or was it worth
Right.
the time? Because I spent a lot of effort into it. And then I found out afterwards that people were quite disappointed that I stopped that.
Yeah, see, exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, that's why I definitely related to that. And it's one thing I would want to, I wish I had continued to do. I did do media. So often media would come
Right.
to me to say what happened, because I could do it in a way that people understood.
Yeah.
I could talk from all perspectives and say how we arrived at the decision. Whether I agreed with that decision on council or not,
Right.
I mean, my job was to provide my perspective, the perspective I was hearing, the data that I was seeing. We had the conversation and the decision was made.
Yeah.
But I could explain what happened.
I love it.
So that was valuable to people, and that was part of the job I certainly enjoyed.
I agree that. Again, personal opinion, but I feel like I've known you like that my whole life, knowing you. Someone that really takes issues, problems, whatever, and is able to kind of put them into an understandable context, but also level-headed.
Thank you. I like to think so. I like to think so. I'm pretty pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's something I respect a lot, because again, talking about especially today's like odd political environments, I feel like it's a missing link.
I agree with you.
And again, I'm not here to talk about sides of any kind,
Right.
but just more or less
The political rhetoric.
there just seems to be so much on both or multiple sides for that matter, and there doesn't seem to be like a voice of reason. I don't know how else to word that, but I feel like that's what's missing in politics right now. I mean, obviously that's always amplified by U.S. politics. I get it.
Well, what happens there comes up here, which is all the
Yeah.
more reason we have to be cautious and careful and fight that.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think it's people are hungry for the truth.
Yeah.
They're tired of the rhetoric.
Yes.
They're tired of the over amplification of things. Just tell me what the truth is. Let me tell you my perspective. Let you tell you my experience. They want someone to have a voice for them.
Yes.
And I agree. I think it's gone way.
And also to
people
be
aren't-
okay with disagreeableness.
Yeah.
That part is what the part that like to be able to have a conversation and still walk away saying I learned something. I may not agree, but it doesn't have to be like some hyped up, fiery, death to this person or God forbid,
Yeah.
Like I just feel like that's just so.
You can oppose a point of view without being an enemy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know, like that's what I feel is really missing. And so anyway, that's something that I in my personal perspective of you, is something that I've always admired and seen as just someone that can kind of navigate that landscape in a way that isn't necessarily heated. Doesn't mean it's not passionate.
Yeah, you need to be
Right.
clear
Yeah.
on your messaging.
Yeah.
You need to be clear on your perspective.
Yeah.
You need to, but what you're saying is you need to listen to
Yeah.
the other side,
Yeah.
and you need to have a conversation around that. And you can agree to disagree, and you can have a strong voice without being loud.
And there can also
Ranting.
be compromise at that
Sure.
point too, because listening to other people's ideas. I mean, some of the seats that you've also held or boards that you've been on, not everyone agrees in the exact same way on a board. There's always varying opinions and whatever kind of discourse and agreeableness that exists through that. But through those conversations, there's compromise, and then there's new ideas that we don't all have the answers. So again, not to like push on that subject, but that's seriously just something that I think has always been my interpretation of the Bridget Mearns that I know.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to hear that, because I that's how I see myself.
Good.
So I'm glad that that's how you see me too.
And so were you just one term on council?
Two.
2 terms. So you started in 2010, is that?
Started in 2010, went to 2013, ran for mayor.
Right.
Was unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Then a councillor passed away. He died in an avalanche.
Oh,
Wade Galloway.
Yes.
So that went to a by-election, and I won in the by-election. So I was back on council for a second term.
Gotcha.
And then I took a term off.
Yeah.
I was doing the exhibition project.
Yeah.
I was finishing my MBA in executive management. So there was a lot on and council, and I didn't do council part-time.
Yeah.
Although I think the expectation is it's part-time. That's not how I did it.
Yeah.
I went to all of the events. I met with constituents.
I
I did the
remember.
material. I did the research. I came informed, and that takes time.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a lot. That
yeah.
was a lot to be doing my master's degree, council, and also the exhibition development. So I did take a term off. It was the right thing for me to do.
Right.
Many people question that. It's very difficult to get back in. It's easier to stay.
That is
People know
true.
your
That is true.
name. You're an incumbent. There's an advantage to that. Once you're out, it's a little more difficult to get back in. But the bug was still there. I love this city, and I have a lot to give. And I don't mean that to sound like I'm bragging.
No.
There's certain talents that people have and certain abilities that they have. And in my opinion, that's a gift and a responsibility to share.
Yes.
And so those are my gifts. I understand governance. I understand policy. I understand community. I bring the passion and the motivation. So I brought that back to the mayoral race because I knew that there's still public service.
Yes.
I am absolutely motivated by public service. And
as someone, I do love politics in just the grand scheme of all of it. Like, I love watching both Canadian and American politics and just the talking points, the different things that happen. But balance is a word that to me also comes from talking to you. Again, we were just talking about like a reasonable voice, but also balance. People forget that, to me at least, balance is important. Even when we're talking about council or, even if we're comparing it to U.S. politics and Congress and those kind of things, it's like balance is important. There shouldn't be just one voice that is kind of leading all of the ideas. It's okay to have those ideas challenged by other voices, right?
Absolutely. And I don't think Canadians are one or the other.
No.
We're not one or the other.
No.
The majority of us are somewhere in the middle, going back and forth.
Yes.
That's where the majority of Albertans are.
I totally agree. I think, again, it's easy for people to get caught up in the phrase because that is generally, I always compare it to like again, going back to a silly analogy, but like the roast and toast again. Like, It's easy to just pick on something that something has become a little bit viral from a clip or comment or controversial, and then people just like to have like the keyboard arguments, and then it becomes kind of more expanded by the algorithms of social media platforms, right?
Yes.
So I understand, but I also understand like why that works, and again, being in what I'm in, I get the component of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the balance of it is really what's important at the end of the day too, is to have those different voices and learn different ideas. Again, even if you disagree with those ideas. And you must have learned, I mean, being part of Build too would be I would imagine a big component of that, different ideas and different solutions and
For sure, yeah. I mean,
Policy.
it's an industry that encompasses a lot of different kind of businesses. So residential construction is our industry, and our focus and our goal is a healthy residential construction, which means a healthy economy, healthy jobs, great paying jobs. It's an important industry, but we don't all necessarily agree within that industry on certain things. But we rally around the goal, which is a healthy residential construction industry, housing choices for individuals, affordability of ownership. Those are all things we agree on.
That's true.
And how we get there.
But I'm curious with your expertise, like, is there a fix to the housing issues that are happening? Because I feel like it's a big layered cake of just so many unique things that have occurred in the last 5 years that it kind of led to this like perfect storm, for lack of a better word.
There are a lot of factors at play for sure. Supply is one of them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that does affect Lethbridge, but not like it does in other large urban centers, which is what you hear on the media mostly. Right. You're hearing about the supply issues in larger centers, which affects affordability.
But is the supply just, and again, I'm being very ignorant. premise that. Is the supply from enhanced immigration, or just we
Well,
just
it-
didn't catch up because of COVID, or
Again, I don't think there's any one thing.
Right.
Right. So, a lo- it, it's about what people can afford as well. So there's an
Sure.
entire continuum of housing. So it's never really about just market housing,
Right.
and that's often where we're focusing on.
Okay.
But it's also about social housing and affordable housing. So how what's happening over here
Yeah.
can affect what's happening over here.
Okay, that's fair.
So it's not just one thing. It is definitely people looking for places to live, but it's also about the affordability of those places. So if affordability has become very difficult, you're going to have a whole lot more people in this section of
Right.
the housing continuum focused.
Right.
And I think we're seeing that because the supply that's coming on is unaffordable for many.
Right.
So now everyone's focusing on rental. And if people aren't moving out of rental, so 80% of rentals become available because people move into ownership.
Right.
If they can't move into ownership, they're staying in rental. If your rental supply isn't there, you're all fighting over the same rentals and price
Right.
goes up. And now everything's unaffordable. And now you're pushing people down the housing continuum, needing supportive housing. So you have to look at what is happening in each piece of the housing continuum
And
to
then you're
understand.
adding layers, like, to me, again, this is my ignorant version of it, but like, to me, then you add layers of the unaffordability happening in like Ontario, Vancouver, for people that do own though,
Yeah.
that are having an opportunity to sell, have, I won't say substantial, but have decent equity coming out of that with the price growth that allows them to move to Alberta
Yes.
and essentially buy a house, for lack of a better term, cash, maybe not totally, but essentially for cash.
Well, and we are, that's
And
absolutely.
then the Albertans are now competing with that. So that's why I say I feel like it's like this weird catch-22 where it's like there doesn't seem to be one way or another of how to like calm that.
And that's
And I feel
supply
like
and
we're
demand
stuck,
again.
we're like stuck in this like one little conundrum, if you will, and hopefully it just kind of starts to taper. But yeah, anyway, that was
Yeah. Well, and we are absolutely seeing people
Yeah.
coming from Ontario, but we're also seeing people coming out of BC that can no longer afford to live there.
Yeah, yeah.
So a lot of it, it's about affordability, and we're lucky in Alberta that we are relatively affordable compared to other communities, but we have to be really careful that remains the case.
Yeah, because we could put ourselves in the same trajectory at least.
If you just look at the cost of new homes, for example, what they've increased over the last number of years, that alone is making it less people being able to move into that. It's more expensive. So we have to look at what are the factors that are doing it. Some of them you absolutely they're out of your control.
Yeah.
But there are many things that we have to continue to focus on that are in our control, and a lot of them is government policy.
Okay.
So taking this is an extreme example, but so the province of Alberta adopted the building code at Tier Code 1.
Okay.
There are 5 tiers. They've also agreed to, and this is work that Build Alberta has done on behalf of our industry, and it was great to see them work with the government to do this. There's also an energy step code or building code that's unified in Alberta. So if you build a house in Edmonton, it's going to be the same build in Lethbridge.
Oh, okay.
That's not the case in British Columbia. So municipalities can determine what tier code energy or tiered energy step code they want to use, and maybe it's a 3 in Fernie and it's a 1 in Kamloops. Again, I'm simplifying it.
Yeah, basic example, but
But it doesn't make it more difficult, and it also affects the cost of a house. So building a tier 3 energy step code house is more expensive than, say, a tier 1.
okay.
When we're getting into tiers 4 and 5, the analysis shows us we can't really even do that without significantly increasing the cost of a house. So there's just one policy around energy step codes that we agree as an industry we need to look at.
Right.
We are building, in Lethbridge, most builders are building to a tier 2.
Okay.
Provincially, they're required a tier 1.
Yep.
So we're already, the industry's already there. They're moving towards that. But those are things that become law that can affect the affordability of a home.
Okay. That makes sense. See, now you're teaching me something new. That's what I like. We learn new things together.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then for density or going back to affordability in a community, you can even look down at the municipal level, and now you're looking at land use bylaws. So what we've seen an increase in Lethbridge is secondary suites and homes. And this helps someone with affordability. So I
Right.
can buy the house and rent the suite underneath.
Yes,
So now I'm giving an affordable unit to somebody.
Yeah.
I'm increasing density on that piece of land. And I'm now able to afford my home.
Right.
Canadians build...
Which also adds another rental opportunity. And
Absolutely.
that's
Right.
yeah,
Because we
yeah.
know that we need rent.
Yeah.
We need rental spaces.
Yeah.
So this allows somebody to build their equity. It's how Canadians build equity is in home ownership. But to be able to do that, the land has to be zoned for secondary suites.
Gotcha.
So where in the city can you do secondary suites? And if you don't have a piece of property that's zoned secondary, then you have to go to a public hearing.
Oh.
And then the city, because you need an amendment.
Yeah.
And then that will go to city council. And then you
and
may or may not.
That works the same. Like if you're saying I want to legally sweep my house, that would be a requirement. Is that kind of what you're saying, or?
I'm not sure. You know what? That's a good question. I
Maybe
would
you
want
don't
to
know the answer
Yeah,
off the
I
top
don't
of your head.
know.
That's okay.
I don't know how it affects homes that create a legal
yeah.
suite. I would
Yeah.
imagine it's similar.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean there would be some sort of
I don't
permission
know.
request for sure. But
My experience is more on the new home builds.
okay.
And then people who buy land,
Yeah.
if they want to put that kind of home up
Gotcha.
and it's not zoned, they have to rezone it.
Gotcha.
Or if, say, an infill, you buy a piece of property and you want to put a fourplex on what used to
Right.
have a single family, and there are many large lots that's
possible.
possible, but it has to be properly zoned. So now you're putting in your zoning application, it's $5,000.
Yeah.
That goes to a public hearing, and then it goes to council for decision. So all of that has cost and time.
Sure.
And you may not be successful at the end of it.
Right.
So should we be permitting more flexibility in our zoning from the get-go? Should we be allowing, say, secondary suites on all single-family lots, just as a blanket
And I
thing?
imagine there's arguments on
There
both
are
sides
arguments
of
on
that
both
coin.
sides,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
And developers who develop neighborhoods don't necessarily envision secondary suites everywhere. You have to consider density. You have to consider what amenities are there.
Yeah.
You build a development based on the population that you have in your vision. You know this ahead of time. So there are pros and cons of it, but it's a discussion that you have to have. And then if you do have a commitment towards second or having more rental units, and you are looking at affordability and you are looking at increasing density, and those are your goals, then you have to do that way off. You have to check and balance.
And I think Lethbridge has done a pretty darn good job of that overall. Mm-hmm. Like, as someone who's also, I mean, I haven't lived on a boat, but as someone who's traveled lots, to me, Lethbridge has always been such a well-designed city.
It is.
Like, it really is a well-designed city. The accessibility of the entire city is, like, so great. Yeah. I mean, it's just a well-designed city.
Yeah, and it's not exactly. It's well designed. It's not by accident.
Yeah.
So the developers work to make sure that everything is aligned, and they work with the city on those kind of things,
Yeah.
and the quality of those, and where and how. And one of the things we've been working on the city with is land use.
Yeah.
And efficient land use. So not even the bylaws, but how do we develop our roads, and how much land are we taking to do that? And so this is conversations that we have, and then offsite levy. So all of these things affect affordability.
Yeah.
So if you have an arterial road and you have 15 meters on each side that's just for buffer, maybe you need it, maybe you don't.
Yeah.
Is that the best use of that land?
Right.
Could that be housing?
Gotcha.
So those are conversations that we have
Interesting.
as an industry, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. You educated me some more then.
There you
See?
go. All right.
And what else you got? What's new? Tell me what's new. I imagine you have some exciting news to share. At least something that I just noticed, but maybe you want to talk about it, maybe you don't.
Sure, yeah, I can. I had put my name forward to be the NDP Lethbridge West nominee for the upcoming by-election. So right now we're in the process, or the party membership is in the process of choosing who their candidate's going to be for the by-election. So when Shannon, thank you. It's very exciting. I think this is a really exciting time for Lethbridge West specifically, but I also think it's an exciting time for the NDP in the province with Naheed Nenshi leading up the party. For me, anyway.
He's who took over Rachel Notley's position.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't know, obviously, that Shannon Phillips was going to vacate her seat. I think very, very few people did. Yeah. So this wasn't really an opportunity that was on my radar.
Gotcha.
And I have always been, certainly when I was on city council, a nonpartisan politician, and that was important to me. Yep. I think it's very important that you have councillors that aren't prescribing to a specific ideology. They're making decisions based on what they're hearing in the community, what's right for the city to move it forward, what does the data say. All of that's important. So it was important to me not to be affiliated with the party. And then Bill 18 and Bill 20 came out, which is now pushing towards municipal governments having a political affiliation.
Gotcha. I heard about it, but I'm not, I got to admit, I'm not very educated on the structure of that, but in any case.
And we'll see. So there's going to be a pilot in Edmonton and Calgary in the next election. They will be permitted to run as a party member in a municipal election. Okay. We'll see what that looks like. There's really only one place in...
Like, is it more or less just saying, I identify, essentially, to this, or...
It may even be more than that. Okay. It may be the party saying, this is our candidate.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Right. Which I think is not good.
Okay.
For decision making. There's a reason we have 3 very distinct orders of government, municipal being the freest without having any party affiliation, because you make decisions that just really aren't, they're everyday decisions. You're talking about quality of water. It's quality of water. You're talking about needing rec centers. So it really is, I think, important to have nonpartisan decisions.
I think can you be, how do I ask that? Can you be do you believe you can be affiliated to a party but still be less partisan, I guess, or more do you know what I'm, like, to still have that independent mindset of, regardless of what team I'm playing on, I come with my own ideas and solutions as well? Or
that's specific.
Or do you find that when you're part of like a party that you kind of have, I don't want to say toe the line, that's not what I'm trying to say, but more or less that you're kind of having to be more in line with the goals of the overall party?
That's basically what a party is, yes. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, there's certain different perspectives within a party umbrella, for sure. And what you're seeing with the Alberta New Democrats, which is attractive to me, is that party that umbrella is widening. It's both parties have changed quite a bit. Sure. Like the UCP is not the Progressive Conservatives that I grew up with. Yep. It's not the Peter Lougheed Progressive Conservatives. And we're seeing, shifts. Yep. We're absolutely seeing shifts. When you're, so you will have varying degrees of opinion within a party, but a party has a specific stance and a specific values that you will be required to uphold. Right. So being able to be a municipal councillor and leader, having none of that, in my mind, frees you to do your job better.
I would agree with that, 100%.
So when that bill came forward, that was a real concern to me. The other things that came out in that bill was the provincial government to have the ability to overturn bylaws or even remove councillors. And I understand there are problematic things that happen at the municipal level, but I think it's up to the municipal level to figure that out.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a number of things. How elections are financed has also been changed. So as a municipal politician who was concerned about those things, I was already sort of, my radar was up going, what is going on here? and there's enough other things where I'm like, what is going on here? Like CPP, the crisis in healthcare, the continuing ballooning of our classrooms. And we're seeing that in Lethbridge, but the government no longer tracks it. So it's hard to, you don't track what you don't want to know.
It's valid. So that happens in business too. Yes. That's why businesses fail.
Right. So this is a real concern. There's all sorts of concerns. And then Naheed Nenshi popped on the scene as wanting to lead the Alberta New Democrats. And I thought, so I've followed his career. We were on council at the same time. I've known him back from 2010. And I thought, well, here's something exciting. Here's something exciting.
Re-energized you.
He brings that perspective that you talked about, where it's bringing people together, working for Albertans.
I felt that obviously when he was mayor for a long period of time. I know maybe towards the end of his tenure, and again, I don't recall the circumstances. There might have been less favorability, for lack of a better word, but I always felt that yeah, similar. Like when he was in the mayor's seat in Calgary, like I never once really heard people say negative things. He was always a pretty positive leader. So I respect that.
Yeah, and I do as well. He's an incredibly intelligent man. He's articulate, and he's also pragmatic. So there's a real tie that I see, and I see a parallel in his career. So he also was a very nonpartisan politician municipally, and he's also found that he has a home in the Alberta New Democrats. So I sort of see our paths kind of paralleling. So he sort of spurred me into thinking, and then Shannon did her announcement, and I'm thinking, wow, public service to my core, motivated for our city, deeply understand the issues, want to be a part of change, want to be part of something positive, want to have a voice of the people. Doesn't it just make sense?
Yeah, you're a good person for the role.
Thank you.
100%.
Thank you.
100%. I like I said, coming from my knowledge of being able to have the chance to work with you on a few items in the past, it's always been a very, very positive experience, and one that I always admired, and anybody that I have a chance to talk to that brings up your name in any capacity, I have nothing but positive things to say, to be totally honest with you.
Well, thank you.
So yeah, that's a big deal to me. Like I respect people that my dad had a weird saying, and he always said, your last name is your credit card. And when I was young, I didn't really understand exactly what he meant by it. As I got older, it made total sense. It is your credit card. It means a lot. Don't do anything that's going to stain your credit / your name,
your reputation.
And so, having a good understanding of what he meant by that, there's, I would say, in my experience, not a whole lot of people that have been able to accomplish that. And again, doesn't mean that we don't all mess up. We all have our blunders. I'm not saying there's perfection in any of that.
Correct.
But I just mean as an overall, there's in my personal experience, there's not a ton of people that I've met that have kind of held that same value to their name, and I have to say you're one of those.
Well, thank you.
So,
well, that's
so. Again, and that's not trying to fluff you up.
Well, I'm feeling a little fluffed up.
So yeah, it just really is with a lot of the experiences, both on boards that I've had the opportunity to, like, again, this is my personal opinion if anybody wants to know, but that really is what it comes down to. It's just like very pragmatic is the word you use, and I totally agree with that. To shift gears for a moment, even just talking about business, and because obviously, like, you've been a part of some pretty great institutions, working towards some form of like enhancement or growth, particularly in the community for sure, politically and non-politically.
Yeah.
How do we make Lethbridge a better business environment, or do you have any recommendations for businesses to find new paths or new strategies, or just from what you've seen and lived and breathed?
Yeah.
I know it's an open question.
It is. It's a broad question for sure, but I think what immediately goes to mind when I think about the businesses that are in the Build membership and the ones that are succeeding and doing well are the ones who are investing back into their employees.
Okay.
And I know it's a difficult time. Business is an incredibly difficult thing.
Yeah.
And I know the important thing that you want from a government is one that's predictable and you know the rules and it doesn't change.
Yep.
And in my experience, that's super important.
Yes.
You've got to keep the rules the same. People have to know what the rules are, and they'll work within those.
Yep.
But they're constantly changing. it's an
Yeah,
issue. And
the goalpost moves.
yeah, and that's just not good for business environment. But the ones that I'm seeing do really well understand their employees are their biggest assets,
Okay.
and they're investing in that. And that doesn't mean that you're spending a ton of money. It could just mean after work you're having a sit down 501 club on Wednesday nights so that people can just sit and chat and be a part of something.
Okay. I like that.
But we are also seeing people are investing in their employees because money is not, and I don't mean wages
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Money isn't the things that are keeping people now
It's true.
because wages are going up and it's becoming very competitive and people are moving around.
Yep.
What's keeping them is the loyalty of their employer to the employee and back. And that's something that has to be fostered and nurtured.
It's hard to do.
It's hard to do. Well, you would
to do.
know. I
Hard to
mean,
do.
it is hard to do. And yeah, I guess I'm making it sound easy. What I'm saying is it's not easy, but likely worth your time.
And no, I wasn't referring that it's not. It actually is easy. In my opinion, it's actually a lot easier than people make of it.
Okay.
It's just hard to do because you have to make time to do it.
This is it. This is absolutely
the actual
the biggest barrier.
The actual doing of it is, people don't really want a lot. And I know I'm simplifying it, but the average employee doesn't need a lot. And we're not talking about wages or that kind of stuff, but just saying in terms of simple things like appropriate recognition. I always said like that's probably one of the biggest things that I noticed even growing up in the workforce, that employers just never made time to just give a pat on the back when appropriate.
Yeah.
And let people know that they were appreciated for what they were doing.
And I've definitely been guilty of that.
Yep.
That your head is down and you're plowing every day, and if you don't look up and appreciate the people around you and tell them they need to feel it. You can't tell them. They need to feel that they're appreciated.
Yes.
Then it's at your peril for
But
sure.
you said something to me that's interesting, and I feel like it plays, again, at least it plays into the way that I try and operate myself, but one that I try and tell other people about is you kind of just talked about, even in the housing side, right? Like knowing the rules. And I feel like, I'm not talking every business, but there's a lot of businesses out there that haven't set their rules up properly. And by rules, I mean like rules to have kind of like those milestones or checkpoints to do the things with their employees that they could be doing.
Right.
Setting up that. And I'm not talking about like a 3-month review or an annual employee review. I'm talking like genuine, like certain time period check-ins to, is it time to review this person for a raise? How often are you going to review that? Just for that, not for, did they call in sick a couple of times? Like, is there real value being created here in this position? Mm-hmm. Also, what kind of goals can you set upon? New goals. Again, not saying about the goalposts not having to move in business. Obviously, there's a lot of fluidity too.
Yeah.
But just having like the right worksheet, I guess, to say, okay, this is my structure and it needs to be followed for every employee, regardless of whether they're in management or whatever position they hold. So I feel like there's some keys where I think business owners could systematize their employee relationships a lot better.
Yeah, if you're relying, and I think that's probably true in everything in our lives.
Sure.
I'm certainly finding that routine and structure and planning is important. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, I've not been that great at it personally. Like professionally, I think I'm pretty good at it, but personally, I could do more of it. But you certainly can accomplish more when you're not thinking about what you have to do so much as you know what you're doing next, and you have a clear path and you stick to it. And if it's not working, you move on. But you don't move on too quickly. Like give it its shot. Yeah. Like you did with this.
Yeah, like it's not lean. There's no such thing as a linear path, in my opinion. But if you have the guideline, you might be in the right lane, you might be in the left lane.
Yeah.
But either way, you're still kind of moving at least in the right direction.
But having a written plan and having a thought out plan and schedule.
And it doesn't have to be robust.
And that's not easy either. But I mean, I understand how difficult some of this stuff can be when you're a small business and it's you and a few other employees and you're doing 15,000 things already.
Yes, I can definitely relate to that.
Right.
I can definitely relate to that. But again, I think it just doesn't take a whole lot of effort. You know, even for ours, making sure that we implemented an Employee of the Month program, just so that peers could recognize each other. We're a small team. We don't have to do it. It could be as simple as just making sure someone pats a colleague on the back from time, but it doesn't. But it won't happen if it's not systematized. So that's just like a way to systematize it.
Or it happens once.
We have 6-month salary reviews for every employee, like dated, and that's just to say, yep, there might not be an opportunity for a raise. There might, but we'll have a conversation about it. We're not going to dodge the conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And we'll be honest of where your particular area is at in terms of, revenue to cost.
So meaningful feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not hiding behind it.
Yeah.
Just saying, look, in order for us to get you to the next level, like we're going to need to increase the sales by this much.
I guess that goes back to the rules conversation. People want to know what the rules are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I mean. So I feel like, I guess in a long form, in some cases, I feel like the word corporation has become a bit of a dirty word in some aspects of life. And I get it when you're comparing it to mega corporations, like Amazon as an example. But I mean, even that company has its challenges. Like it would be a logistical minefield running that kind of a company with that many employees and that many systems. And so I get it has its own challenges too. You can think of it as evil, but at the same time, it deals with challenges just like any other business does too.
I would think they're quite amplified.
Yeah, it's going to try. I mean, it's not going to. Yeah. Anyway, people might have a different opinion of that, but when it comes to real like local business, like that word corporation is really not. It doesn't have the same meaning as a mega,
right.
Multinational.
Most of our businesses are small and medium.
Yes.
They're not that. They're the ones I was talking about where one person is doing 15 things.
Yeah.
And you're getting through and you're plowing every day and you're doing what you can and you're engaged in the community and that's the another piece of advice is engaged. The success that I'm seeing are where they're as a company doing something back for the community.
Yep.
I see that a lot in our membership.
Yep.
So it's rallying around a specific something. I can think of 2 builders specifically that are working with getting backpacks to kids in schools. Nice. One has done a complete renovation for nothing, for free, for someone who showed a need.
Wow.
Another is heavily involved in the Angel Tree and does bikes, but they do that as a group. Yeah. They get together as staff and sit down. What are we going to support and how are we going to do it? Anyone can write a check.
Yes.
It's entirely different when a company says we're going to take the time and I'm going to pay you to have this conversation and we're going to do these things together.
I love that though. I love that because that is true. That is what the average local business is like. They're trying to figure out how to feed their own families, provide quality service, and give back to the community in some meaningful way.
And time is valuable. So this isn't about money. This is about time.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is challenging at the same time because even, small businesses are contending against big companies too. Mm-hmm. I mean, the world has become a very small place in terms of purchasing. Yeah. You can buy almost anything you want from wherever you want and almost have it
next day.
Like almost have it instantaneously. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's amazing progress, one.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it comes with its set of challenges too. Yeah. And you are going to have to contend on price sometimes when it comes to that. So, but yeah, I feel
it's not easy. There's no doubt about it.
It's not easy, but I feel like if business owners just really, really, really focus, I don't know, customer service is a word that to me has kind of been slightly put wayside since COVID.
I would
agree. This is my personal opinion.
I've noticed that as well.
I feel like there's been, I don't want to say anger. That's not the word I'm looking for, but just less niceties. to put it in a nice way. Again, and I don't know whether that's a missed training opportunity that's happening with just trying to get staff to fill slots and filling those employment roles. Obviously you're maybe putting in a little bit less requirements in some aspects than others. I get the challenge, but my point is still the same. I've gone to different places where it's hard to get a hello.
Are you going to go back to those
Well,
places?
and so my point is like with those places, like they do have an opportunity to earn the business. And if they don't take that opportunity when someone's walking through the door, they will choose after the fact the cheaper, less community-based option.
Right.
But if you can make them feel at home, and the only reason I have an opinion on this is because, again, my business is literally you can buy it anywhere. It does not require you to be in a physical place, right? I don't have to. I'm not selling a candle.
Right.
So you can buy it from India, Mexico,
Right.
you name it, right? It can be purchased anywhere. Why do people buy from me and my team, right? And you can only do it by literally trying to give the best experience possible, honest advice, acknowledge failures. So again, not being afraid of saying, Kate, this isn't going in the direction that we would like. Let's try something else. And it's something I talk a lot about even in like business networking groups is, again, just the recognition of being open, transparent, providing the service that you said you were going to deliver on, and just being nice.
Yeah.
Just being nice. That art has that's why I say that's the art that I feel has slowly been diminishing is just the art of being like, hi, and smile, and how are you?
Yeah. I often wonder if the impact of COVID was how many people have been shifting in where they're working. And there are management positions that have disappeared and people have moved into roles without the guidance that would have been there before.
Right.
So you're seeing a lot of people struggling in positions. They really don't have any support. And I believe this is why we're seeing a lot of struggles with delivering service or product properly or to an expectation we had before. There are people who've moved into positions that just aren't supported.
Right. And that's what I mean. Like, I feel like it's just, to me, it's not like it's a bad thing from the person that's necessarily in the role. Just that maybe, like you just said, they're not getting the right training supports or even the right rules. I'm going to keep going back to the rules-based thing. I like that one. Setting out the rules of how that's intended to work for them and what they can be doing, or even courses they can be taking to help them in those roles to grow personally, right? Whether that's, hey, your role requires a much more social component. Great. Like, can we get them in some sort of networking group to help them, work on delivering like how they speak to people, or some sort of I can't remember the is it mastermind? No.
Oh, Toastmasters?
Toastmasters, sorry.
Does that still exist?
Yeah, cool. I still hear that. But any kind of those situations where you're just kind of helping someone grow in their
Or even
position.
if it's just showing them the job. A number of, maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I feel that there's, the wrong thing was ordered. The person went on holidays and the person who took over didn't know what was happening, and now this problem has happened. Didn't know to do that. That has been, like, there just seems to be a lot of
disconnects.
that. Yeah.
There's disconnects. Yeah, no, you're probably right there. I agree. And again, I think maybe people just also aren't being taught how to deal though with the negative.
This
part of it, but
it would be interesting. I would love to see, and maybe it's out there, the impact of social media on manners.
Yeah.
And then specifically after COVID.
Yeah.
Because we have become very argumentative and very black and white.
Yep.
My way or not.
Yeah.
And if not my way, then We addressed that earlier in our conversation. I would love to know the why of that.
You know what? It's a
is it
great
because
question.
it's become more and more acceptable that we
It's possible. I mean,
communicate this way?
I think my interpretation is that COVID accelerated something that was already on its way to happening,
Right.
which was bubbles. I weird word to use, but like I think people have created their own, whether it's through lifestyle or belief, right?
Right.
Whether it's through religion or not, but people have kind of created their own little bubbles of relationships, news, information, activities, and I feel like a lot of people are staying within those bubbles and not just popping out of them and being like, what's in this bubble?
Right.
What's happening in this bubble? I just want to know more about it. And again, for the same reasons, maybe it's not the right bubble. But they might learn something from checking that bubble out to bring back to their new bubble or their existing bubble and enhancing that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to me, I feel like COVID just kind of put people into a bit of a shell and into their own little bubbles and accelerated what social media was kind of doing algorithmically.
Right.
By feeding just the certain bubble content, right?
Yeah.
And now that transformed through COVID into an actual like lifestyle, where, I mean,
And there's certainly nothing changed. If anything, it's gotten worse.
true. I mean, I always say
Our worlds have become quite small.
it's a great example for me is even in my own neighborhood. You know, we have 4 kids. Well, one's fully moved out, but we have 4 children, and our kids are like they deeply love being outside. So I 100% believe that our neighborhood thinks that we're the crazy family, because they're yelling, they're screaming, they're fighting, you know, they're playing, all the things are happening and all the emotions
And
are
it's all
flying,
outside.
and
Yeah.
it's all outside for everyone to hear. And I always say, like, when I look at a lot of the neighborhood, I'm not pinholing everybody, but when I look at a lot of the neighborhoods, like the car comes in, it goes in the garage, and that's it. You don't know who they are. You don't really talk to them. There isn't a lot of that like community that I believe was there pre-COVID. Honestly, I think COVID accelerated just that like I don't
Or
know,
isolation.
solemnness or isolation.
Yeah.
And so even in our neighborhood, like it's rare for us to see like the other kids like rolling around and playing.
I'm seeing it.
But yet I go to
getting
like somewhere
better.
like Copperwood,
Yeah.
and like it's just so vibrant in that aspect. So I get that different communities will have different feels, but yeah, I noticed that at least in mine after COVID.
I think there'll be some time yet for people to come around, but we're definitely seeing people out more and people doing more things and getting more engaged.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely it stunted some of that without a doubt. And
Yeah.
people were frightened and yeah. So I'm
it's
hoping
an
you'll see it.
It's an acceleration.
Get better, yeah.
But to kind of somewhat end on a point, I wanted to talk to you about motivation because, man, you are a highly motivated individual. Look at the things you pursue. Can I ask you, like, I guess what keeps you moving, or what keeps you motivated, and is there any, not formula, but is there anything that other people might be able to lean on to help
To find their motivation?
to help find their motivation?
They probably, I don't know that I would want to give that more thought, but for me, and I don't know why,
Yeah.
maybe it's because I've watched my father move here from, well, I wasn't born when he moved here from Holland, but I've seen him grow his business and the sacrifice that it took and the connections that it took. And he was one of the largest employers in the city at one point.
Wow.
And so I've seen his life. I see my mother. I watched my mother grow up in her life of public service, which was mainly her adult life. She was giving back to the community in her way.
Yeah.
And there's this sense that there's more I can do to make things better.
Okay.
why I need to make things better, or like why
Yeah.
that is a core motivator for me, I think just has to come back with how I was raised. And it's incredibly important to me, whether I'm doing it in the public way, through a political leadership position, which I may or may not get. We'll see. The nomination hasn't been determined. Or it's with me as Build, and I'm still, although my primary purpose is a healthy residential construction industry for the businesses in that industry, it's also about making sure that we're keeping an eye on affordability for the public, that the things that I do improve the community as well. Though my primary purpose is this, it's always going to have a component, regardless of where I'm going to be. There's always going to be that.
Okay.
Because it's important that you make, if you can and you have the skills, that you make whatever it is better.
You couldn't have said it better. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, that is, I can relate to your drive. So, my drive comes from a weird place too. I didn't like the arts growing up, oddly enough. I hated it, in fact.
The arts?
Arts in general. I hated the arts. Like all the way up until grade 9, it would have been. Like whether it was drawing, whether it was, any kind of drama classes or whatever. Like I wanted nothing to do with it. And again, just talking about like the funness of opening your bubble.
Right.
My mom said to me, she's like, you're going to go in an art class this year. And she's like, it's okay if you don't end up liking it, but you have to at least try it. And if at the end of that year you tell me no dice, I'll respect that component of your answer. I was like, okay. And I tried it, and obviously I ended up like totally falling in love with it.
So did she see something in you that or was she seeing that you were avoiding this, the kid should go try it, or what do you think that was?
I honestly don't know the motivation behind it. I mean, I did like to scribble and do that kind of stuff when I was just at home. So maybe she saw like some level of me to just try and see if I could pursue it in a more meaningful way. But that led to that. Both my parents were entrepreneurial to some degree.
Right.
And so again, like I do agree that the upbringing, it actually does play a role in people's lives, 100%.
Yeah.
I wish every family was exposed to some of that. I don't want to say higher level thinking, but just like exposed to those different opportunities and ideas and motivations, so that they don't end up as adults putting themselves in a little box. But in any case, the arts came to fruition. All this stuff came to fruition, and then just with my father, like one of his core values was really always based on, again, I said the credit card thing. It was really based on honesty. And so as I started getting into this industry, I was like, oh, what's missing here? One was meeting deadlines. So I remember. So one of my very first clients is one of your Build members, and
okay.
and it was literally like the one thing when I started. He said, if there's anything you can control, is that you meet the deadline that you set out. You do that, and you'll have a leg up on your industry. So that was really important to me. That advice stuck to this day. And the second one was the honesty part. And I know that sounds really funny to say, but I feel, and especially more so now than ever, because the barrier to entry is kind of low, is the honesty component. Our industry is filled with fluff. I'm not saying that people are doing bad jobs. I'm just saying it's filled with fluff and an avoidance of facts, with a narrative that isn't just a positive narrative based on how they want the relationship to be. So if a report comes out, and I really saw this in the automotive world. So this is like a sticking point to me.
Yeah.
Every meeting in the automotive marketing environment started with, the report was on the screen. Here you had like the management and ownership at the table, and the first thing out of that company's mouth was, we had a really great month. We can't wait to show you the numbers. And I would look, and you would see the disillusionment in their faces, because the question was incorrect. They were starting off by patting themselves on the back instead of just saying, "How was business last month?" And with the answer being able to adapt the reporting based off what happened on the ground.
Oh.
So it always was this like, look at us and the ownership going, we only hit 50% of our target. You're telling us that you crushed it. This doesn't align.
Right.
Where if we could change that narrative and say, how was it? Oh, we hit 50% of the target. Okay, let's talk about that. What can we do moving forward? Here's what I'm seeing in the numbers. This is what this suggested to me. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it looks like it's on an upward trend. And now you can actually have like real dialogue, similar to how you would on like counts or things like that, where you're looking at numbers. Numbers can be interpreted in a lot of different ways and presented even more so in different ways.
Yep.
So those were kind of like the big components for me, was how do I just be as honest as humanly possible with people and letting them know when something's working, when something isn't, and when something might just need some change. And again, just
that's pretty
the
valuable
passion.
for anybody. I was going to say business, but really for anybody to have relationships and support in their lives that tell them the truth.
Yes. And not to hide from that, right? And it's okay, every now and again, I call random customers and say, what can I be doing better for you? Maybe you feel like we're getting comfortable. We've had a great relationship, but can we do something better? Are we dropping the ball anywhere?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, I've sort of triggered a thought where we've had, I've had business relationships where the person I've hired has come to me and said, that didn't really work. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that didn't work. And you talked about that earlier. Let's try something else.
Yeah, or even
what you want to do here is not going to work.
Yeah, every now and again, you can. I say, even with my team, I'm like, I got an idea, and sometimes I can see the look on their face going, and I'm like, okay, I can tell that you guys don't think this is a good idea. Can we try it and determine whether it's a bad idea, or are you guys telling me this is just really a bad idea? It's like, well, it's really a bad idea. Like, okay, I'm listening. But no, it's a lot of fun, and I think, again, going back to even Lethbridge, like I see a lot of the business community like that. There is a lot of business leaders in this community that do operate that way.
They do.
Through a sense of honesty and duty, almost militarily like.
And pride.
Yeah, pride. Yeah. And so, that would be the biggest advice that at least in this episode, that I want to give to people based on our conversation is to treat your name like a credit card. The higher the credit score you build for your name through honesty and good service, the more likely it's going to open doors for you.
Right.
So.
And probably get your failings forgiven because you've built credit.
Totally. That's right. Yeah.
That's sort of what came to my mind, is because we talked about you're going to fail. I mean, we all fail.
Yes.
We all do blunders.
Yes.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
When it hits get a little credit.
Yeah, when it hits your credit score, it's only going to dip a little bit for a short period of time. You can build it back up fast.
I used to have people would come to me and say, Bridget, really great job. Liked the decision and the process that you did on council. I'm like, please bank that. Because I am sure I will make a decision you disagree with down the road.
Yes.
So remember this moment. Bank that.
Yes, please. Put it on your desktop. Save it somewhere important that you can see it daily, because I'm going to say something you don't agree with.
You can't be a leader and not make decisions that people will agree and the same person disagree with down the road.
It's impossible. It's impossible.
Which is why you never, you just don't govern that way. You really have to make good decisions, authentic decisions. Yeah, based on data. And
I like what you said at the beginning, right? Even telling people how you came to a decision, again, regardless whether somebody agrees with that analysis or not, I think that shows some real character.
It was important to me because I wanted people to know how I arrived at that, but that they were heard.
Yes.
So I would sit down and say, okay, you know what, I hear what you're saying. You're concerned around parking in this neighborhood. This particular project has all the parking requirements needed or determined by the bylaw. So I hear your parking concern. I'm not dismissing it, but I can see that they've met the requirement. So I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
So you've heard, I've heard you.
Yeah.
You know I've listened. I've considered it, and this is the decision I've made.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what? Again, regardless of the outcome, I wish you nothing but success in that. Also,
Thank
as a
you.
West Lethbridge resident, but yeah, that you know what? That's all I could ever ask of someone. So, just because I have you here front and center, if you happen to win the nomination, and
Thank you.
and you do happen to win
The by-election?
the actual by-election and everything itself, then all I would ask as a citizen is, to stay true to what you said there.
Yeah, absolutely. My door would always be open.
And I hope that you always also look at a way to continue your blog situation, because I think that would be really valuable to the community.
I was considering. So I'm doing a series of newsletters out to our membership to let them know me and some of the decisions I made and what I stand for. I think that's important when they're making their decision. It might be something I continue with because it's a really great way to communicate and have a back and forth, but know what I'm thinking.
Well, maybe this is the wrong way of like aligning it, but I've always felt, unless you're the one driving the narrative, someone will drive it for you. And so if it's not coming from your mouth, people will make up their own conclusions about what they think should be coming out of your mouth.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And so I've always felt like if you're able to tell your story, whatever that is, whether it's through decision making or what have you, then no one can put words in your mouth.
Right.
And they at least know, again, regardless of whether they agree with you, they
Right.
know how you came to that decision or that conclusion or any of that. And so I hope you continue with that. That would be awesome to see.
I think that's so. There's the party part of an MLA, and that job is absolutely to be true to those values and bring those values forward. And as an opposition member, it's you hold the government accountable. You propose amendments to bills. There's that, and then there's the third part of an MLA, which is representing everybody in your constituency.
Yes.
And that's a big part of what you need to do to be a successful MLA.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes.
Yeah. That's how you develop trust. I feel like, anyway. Well, I wish you nothing but success in all of your journeys.
Thank
I know that you'll do an awesome job regardless of where you land or how you land. So, I'm rooting for you one way or another.
Thank you.
Just in general life and as a human being and the person that I've gotten to know over the years. You're an awesome person, and I'm so glad I got a chance to talk with you today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been nice.
Yay.
Yay.